Like you think that this is how you believe, or that you think that this is your opinion of this thing or how you operate, but actually there's more fear than you would have acknowledged. There's more self-loathing than you would have allowed. There's more shame around this thing that happened when you were 16 than you possibly would have admitted to yourself.
Bienvenido to podcast number 67. I don't know what number this is.
51.
What's good, dude?
So first of all, I got to say thank you to everybody. We are here because of our generous patrons. We had over 100 people sign up. We raised $350 per month, which it puts us at solidly at one podcast per month. So thank you very much, guys. Whoops. The Patreon is still up if you guys want to contribute. We'll continue to announce it. The next goal is $600 per month, which pays Justin to come over twice. And we'll have, at that point, bi-weekly podcasts. But you guys genuinely surprised me, and I'm weirdly flattered by it.
Nice.
So thank you, guys.
Let's get to 2 episodes a month. More than anyone, Justin says thank you as well.
Yeah.
Especially me.
Especially in these trying times.
Yeah.
So, first thing, how about this week's video that we did?
Okay.
Bill Gates.
Yep.
I don't know if you guys have watched it, but I made a video about Bill Gates, and I was cognizant that on YouTube there's 2 groups of people. The vast majority of people, which don't often think about Bill Gates and generally think of him as the guy who owned Microsoft and is donating a lot of his money.
But know very little about him and don't think about him often.
Don't often think about him. And then a smaller but louder, more certain group of people that are very sure that Bill Gates has been integral in spreading coronavirus, wants to depopulate the planet. Look at Event 201, check it out. They're very, very certain. And my goal in making the video was to make it so that either side could watch it and go, oh, I guess I really don't know anything about Bill Gates, and so maybe I shouldn't speak, maybe he's not a savior, and maybe he's not a monster who's trying to depopulate the planet. Everything I've learned about him has been filtered through my own perceptions in the news media. And I changed no minds, according to the comments.
Yep.
I was so not surprised. I shouldn't be surprised anymore. I changed 0 minds.
Yeah, no, the comments are pretty, it's like, yeah, maybe they don't like him because of his body language, or maybe it's because he's a Satanist. Just did not go effectively.
Yeah, so my bad. I genuinely had the intent of taking someone who was certain that they knew about him and just scaling back that level of certainty. Because the more interesting question for me is, how do we know what we know about the people that we watch on video?
Yeah.
And I think we know nothing about them. I think as much as we have this strange one-way relationship where we talk and sometimes answer questions, ultimately, people don't know about you or my life because we don't get to hang out.
That's true, but if you have a good impression of me, you're absolutely right. And if you don't like me, though, you don't know anything about me.
I also, separate from this, read Paul Graham has an essay about haters.
Yeah.
Where he says that
Really?
Yeah. It's fascinating.
Surprising from Paul Graham.
He says, one, if you hit a certain size, they're guaranteed. He says, typically you get fanboys in the first small growth, and then haters come second, and then they grow in a similar proportion. So you'll typically get more fanboys than haters. But he says one of the big problems is that people treat haters like they're the opposite of fanboys, and really they're the exact same thing.
Sorry, and are you saying fanboys is the same as fans, or are you saying fanboys is a specific thing?
Good question. Not a fan. A fanboy is someone who will go to bat for you no matter what. That he says they're uncritical, don't care about the evidence, and yada, yada, yada.
Got it. So this is not to say the audience at large.
No,
this is within the audience. There's 2 pockets. Haters, which no matter what you do, see it through an evil lens, which I've seen this all over the internet. And then 2, people who, no matter what you do, see it through an amazing lens. Yes. You can do no wrong. Yes. Okay, got it.
And his point is just that
they're both wrong.
People love their fanboys who always go to bat for them no matter what they do, and hate their haters. And it's like, you got to recognize that both of these people are being incredibly uncritical, and to take either perception as insight into you as a human or to respond in a particular way is counterproductive. So instead, focus on your craft, focus on the audience at large, but not on either of these uncritical pockets of people that just love or hate you.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so I thought of Bill Gates when I read that.
Yeah.
Like, you got a lot of these haters, but I imagine if it is the case that you have not been spreading a global pandemic, which quite frankly I have not looked into, you probably have a lot of people that are very grateful for the not satanic work done by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Well, it actually ties into something I was going to talk about. I saw something on Reddit that was just fascinating because it was this exact same thing. It was on Cringetopia, and it was Cardi B, and she was crying into a bowl of dry cereal.
watched it,
You saw this, right? And she's like, this isn't fair. I should be eating sushi at a restaurant. And all the comments are like, fuck this bitch, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, if you watch this with any sort of neutral eye, you go, this can't be real, right? Like, no one is this out of touch to A, feel this way, and B, post it. And then it comes out that she's fundraising for frontline responders and being facetious. And this is part of like a longer live stream, and it's a total joke. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's kind of apparent even if you don't know the context by just watching this. You go,
I didn't know it.
If you don't hate her, you go, no one would actually be like this. And
I didn't think that.
You thought it was real?
So I didn't have a strong opinion about Cardi B after watching it, but I thought it was real.
Dude, yeah, so it's not. And I guess my takeaway to people is, if you watch something on the internet
It's just not real.
and get angry at it, take a deep breath, because it's probably not real.
I think that also is true, and this is what you have to say. If you think that the person on camera is a different class of positive, better human, don't believe it either. And so the same thing happened with Ken Bone, if you remember. He was a guy at the debates, and he wore this funny red sweater and had just this and he was an internet idol, and then it turned out that he said things on Reddit that people don't like, and he was hated by the internet. Either one of those really strong emotions about an individual, and this is kind of what I've been exploring in the news, it's so much more useful to look at that as projections of your own shadow side. So what I mean by that is that what we react to very strongly in the world, we often think it's because the world is that way. And really, it's like, no, there's a part of us that's that way, and we despise it, and we hide it from our conscious perception. And then when we do see a reflection of it in the world, we freak out and snap on it, because that's what we're doing internally.
Yeah, and we hate ourselves for that aspect of ourselves.
Yes.
Sure.
So it's been useful for me as this pandemic has occurred to watch what has triggered me.
Yeah.
And to go, okay, let's presume that this isn't the world being different. Like, what part of yourself? And I've seen it with what I've gotten, you know this because I tell you every day. I've been going nuts off of cheating in the system, people who were once politically anti-handout who are eagerly awaiting it's one thing to be consistent with what you think the role of government is, and it's another to flip on a dime as soon as it's your turn to cash in.
Yeah, small government, low taxes, libertarian, and then all of a sudden you're just like, yo, I want unemployment and I want additional benefits because of Corona. It's like, wait, but you stand for small government. You're constantly telling me that taxes are the problem.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I did some self-exploration about what was bothering me, and it's true that is occurring in the world, but what I recognized as I sat down, I was like, man, there's a part of me that I often play by the rules, but I don't want to. You know what I mean? Like, I want to cheat. Like, I want, and I think everybody feels this, there's a part of me that wants as much for me as possible and screw everybody else. And I've been conditioned through morality, and I was a philosophy major, to logic that part of me down.
And not act on it.
And instead
get
donate
really
a lot of money.
Get mad when people do act on it.
Yeah. And what I haven't done, which is the healthiest thing, is to recognize that part of myself, not hate it, not demonize it, integrate it into my being, but not necessarily give it reins over the decision making. And so that's what I've been doing, and it's interesting how when you do that, I was sitting down yesterday and I was seeing like, oh my God, I want it. Because the things that the things that you resist persist at some level. So I've been playing around with that. I don't think I've touched foundational bedrock of that aspect of myself, but it has been useful. And the triggers are a great way to figure out what part of yourself you haven't brought in. This is what's in the emotional mastery course, and I'm redoing it. So I'm like, going through it again in an attempt to redo it. It's good.
Nice.
It's going to be a good course.
That's awesome. Yeah, my only takeaway from Cardi B and Bill Gates, actually, because there was one part with the Bill Gates thing that I was just so confused by, because people were saying he's gone on record saying he wants to depopulate the world. And I was like, well, this must have started somewhere. Like, where? So I was just like, where did this come from? And it came from a TED Talk where he says that vaccines will help with stemming population growth. And when I looked into it, because everybody saw that line and was like, he's killing people with vaccines. His actual hypothesis is just, if you guarantee someone their kids will live, they have 3 kids instead of 7 kids. But most people just go for the instant like inflammatoriness, or they just write it off. And then with Cardi B, what I saw was Reddit got their pitchforks out for her, which just like, she's simultaneously doing a joke and actually raising money for first responders, which no one behind their keyboard is necessarily doing. So my only thing is, if you see someone that you don't know really well and your instant reaction is hatred, either do research and find out what they actually said and are actually doing, or just don't. Just breathe into that for a couple seconds and then go, cool, I actually know nothing about Bill Gates or Cardi B, and I'm okay with that. And then just go watch funny videos or do your own projects.
Sure.
So yeah, that was my thing. I was like, wow, it really makes no sense to have an extreme hatred reaction for someone and then not try to disprove yourself, because the internet is chock full of editing lies at this point.
Well, only if you accept that it says more about you than it does about them. So Bill Gates gave that speech and millions of people watched it. And some people we watched the same speech. Some people thought, wow, what a great thing. And some people thought, oh my God, Freudian slip. He wants to kill everybody.
Yeah.
And then they told some of these people and they said, yeah, I'm not buying it. And it's like, okay, with the same foundational evidence, how do we come to such different conclusions? Well, the only answer is that we must be coming with different assumptions and presuppositions about the way the world is. So the most useful question, no matter what your reaction, oh, Bill Gates is a hero, or this is, what does Bill Gates represent to me? Do I trust authority? Do I distrust authority?
You said something amazing this week that I'm going to ask you to re-say, and if you don't remember how you said it, I wrote it down. But can you define bad faith? And I can say your definition if you don't remember exactly.
I'd go ahead.
Okay. So you said, we were in conversation and you said this, and I was like, wow, this is the smartest argument or debate tactic I've ever heard. So,
geez, man, I'm flattered.
So bad faith is when you argue something and you are pretending that, this is my explanation before I get to your quote, but that you're pretending that you're open-minded and that what you're only on your side because it's the right side, and you're discussing to try to change someone else's mind with the false pretense that you'll change your own. But really both people are there's literally nothing you can say to convince me that Bill Gates is a Satanist or isn't a Satanist. So what you said, which I thought was fascinating, was tell me what evidence you would need to change your mind. And then if you don't change your mind after getting that evidence, you're arguing in bad faith. And obviously say it a little bit less aggressively if you're talking to a friend, but that's fascinating to me. It's like, okay, you think that 5G is causing the coronavirus. What could I show you that would change your mind? If I showed you that there were places that had chock full of 5G with no corona, would you change your mind? No. If in 5 years we aren't controlled by alien reptiles or AI, would you change your mind?
And 5G is pervasive, yeah.
No. And it's like, what can I do? What can I show you? What fact would make you release that belief? Well, and if the answer is nothing, it's like, okay, let's just never talk about this again.
Another good one, and we've discussed this, is, okay, let's put some skin in the game. This is an Nassim Taleb thing, which is that, and it's, you should reflect on this in your own life, because it really does. It'll scale back your certainty with a lot of things. People like to make proclamations about their certainties, and it's always fun to say, okay, let's bet on it. Let's pick a fair odds. You know what I mean? You're certain, so I think 50-50 odds are appropriate.
Generous.
If in 5 years, 5G has this percentage of coverage, and the overlords are not in our brains, let's put $1,000 into escrow right now, and I'll get paid if that's not. Now, granted, it's going to be tough for you to get paid if the overlords are in your brains, because they might mess up the escrow. But if that's not the case, if it is the case in the overlords, you'll get the $1,000 or whatever it is, and you can apply it to your particular situation.
Yeah.
When you ask people to put skin in the game, if somebody's genuinely certain, like they've got insider knowledge, like, dude, Michael Jordan is going to pretend to be hurt this game. The Bulls are going to lose, right?
Yeah.
You will bet on that because you stand to make money. And we know this because people inside trade in the stock market all the time. Eagerly. But if you're unwilling to wager based on beliefs that you claim to hold very dearly,
strong conviction,
that's suspicious. It doesn't immediately, because there's edge cases, but it's very suspicious if you're unwilling to get rich off of things that you know that other people don't know. Especially given that people try to get rich in all other kinds of shady ways. So we've been discussing.
No, so that's a great one. So if somebody is digging their heels in, I think there's two great strategies. One is, okay, let's just make a bet, and then two is, okay, what would I have to show you that you'd change your mind?
Yeah.
And make them say it, because what happens, you'll see, they'll have to live with cognitive dissonance in the front of their brain. Instead, normally what happens is people just experience their beliefs rubbing against each other, but then run away from it. If you're like, okay, so if I can show you that there's a place that has the highest 5G concentration in the world and no coronavirus, would you say that corona is not caused by 5G? And they say yes, and then you show it to them. They might not change their mind, but they will have to, in front of you, process that. And you might actually be able to convince someone to be more open-minded that way.
And I think what is more important, to be less certain, right? And whether we call it open, and perhaps
that's what I'm saying. Be more open-minded. Not change their mind, but be more open-minded. Be less of a zealot.
Which I think if you do believe, quite frankly, if you believe this and there's evidence that's convincing to you, I have no problem with that because I don't actually stand opposed to you right now. I haven't done my research, right? It's exactly what you're saying. If you're unwilling to stand behind these in consequential ways, but you are willing to say that someone else is depopulating the earth, that's you placing a lot of onus on them, no skin of your own in the game, and it's a dangerous place to be because you risk nothing while destroying the reputation of someone else.
Yeah, the bet thing is also just fun because I've seen it shake people's conviction a little bit. You actually get a better conversation sometimes because people will evaluate,
they mitigate it,
and they'll be like, okay, well now I can't talk about this like it's 100% certainty. I have to talk about it like it's how I actually feel.
Yeah.
So it's fun. It really takes the air out of the sails sometimes, and you get a much better quality conversation.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this, and it's not just with regard. First, it was with regard to other people, and then obviously it turns back on yourself. But we've talked about truth versus happiness on this podcast before, and I've been thinking with regards to this stuff. I don't think that any person who hasn't watched, let's say, 10 to 20 hours or read 10 to 20 hours of articles from opposing sides and tried to disprove their own initial hypothesis has flimsy ground to stand on with regards to the character of a guy who's been alive for 60 years. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So that level of certainty that we feel indicates that we are not primarily interested in truth. So it must serve us in some way.
Yeah.
And so it makes us happy. And I've just been thinking a lot about truth and happiness. So the one I told you about, this copywriting book that I read.
Oh God, yeah.
And
what's it called?
It's called the 16-Word Sales Letter.
Okay.
And in it, the guy, in his intro, he talks about, hey, he a few years ago, this guy didn't even speak English. He's from Brazil, and now he's writing these sales letters for Agora that have earned $80 million. And he gets into his thing, and he's talking about how he writes these letters, and he goes, okay, now you get to the part where you write your story. And so here's a couple examples of stories that I've written for sales letters. And one is like, I grew up in Connecticut from a middle-class family. And the other one is like, by the time I was 21, I traded millions of dollars. And the other one's like, by the time I started in Chicago and it's like, maybe these things are possible. You went from Brazil to Connecticut to New York to this, to being poor here and trading penny stocks, but also derivatives at age 21. I really did try to piece together.
Oh, you didn't immediately think it was a liar?
No, I have to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I go, this is a leap. And there's a handful of other things in there where he displays no regard for telling the truth. The only measure of success is, does the sales pitch work? And there was another one that I told you where Amazon is going to announce, he says, I am certain they are going to announce they will accept Bitcoin on this date. Well, clearly the book has been published, and this was in October that he said it was going to accept it. And if you don't get in, they didn't. You know what I mean?
Because at the time, he's trying to write a letter that convinces people to buy his Bitcoin
his product that
his
tells
Bitcoin
you
product,
how to buy Bitcoin or whatever. And no shame, like literally no shame in including that story in this book. And I was thinking, you must think, and it must be true, that most of your readers don't trust you any less, despite the fact that you've told them that you lie to people to get ahead, right? You've admitted that you're a liar. And now I'm still expected to believe that you're a great copywriter, that you do all these things.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Why would I believe that? And your readers must, in their own... this is the other thing. I think that when you are used to a certain level of deception, you become blind to it in your own life and are more easily taken advantage of because you are more permissive of it, So like, this guy might not even be a good copywriter. I don't know.
Yeah, that's fascinating because in the same book, he's the one who's saying, I've made myself $10 million copywriting.
And maybe
but also he's saying...
He grew up in Connecticut.
Yeah. And Brazil at the same time.
And didn't speak English a few years ago. And like,
but went to college a few years ago.
Yeah, but also went to college a few years ago. So how many years ago is a few? Is a few as 15? I mean, that's...
I didn't speak English a few years ago. 31 years ago, I barely knew a word.
So I've been thinking about, anyway, truth and happiness is where I come down to is truth, lying is incredibly effective at achieving a conscious goal of yours. So if your goal is to sell more products in a particular time frame, lying is the better way to get there in the short term, right? Because you're going to be able to move, I grew up here, I sold this, I made $1 million. Like, it's easier to do that.
Your worst case scenario is you can just be honest, and now you're going to tie the guy that's being honest.
You could say more.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, you and I kind of realize that, like, in a small community that can't last very long, but in a world that's the size of ours, you can just move on and on.
You can just burn new. That's how these gurus work. Is they burn an audience for a couple products, and then that person goes, I fucking hate that scumbag, and they go, oh well, I'm just never going to talk to you again. I'm going to talk to this person who's never heard of me. And so yeah, they just
so you can move
like
on
a plague.
and on and on, and in the span of human life, never get your comeuppance. And I thought, I was like, wow, that's a bummer. Maybe lying is better in the long term. But what I realized is that when I think of the people who are more permissive, and there's certainly areas of my own life, I don't mean to say that I'm perfectly honest, because one of the things you realize when you deeply, deeply reflect is that lying is it pervades everything, right? Even the way that we approach the world and the things that we eliminate from our sensory perceptions are like, they're very focused on what is beneficial to us. So I look at this room and I see it in terms of my own survival and benefit, and I'm not seeing the full spectrum of every piece of light that is coming in evenly. So
that's what happens when people research things. They go, I'm going to try to decide if Corona is a hoax or not. But then they'll see an article that says that it's not a hoax, and they'll be, oh, this is unconvincing. And then they'll find one that is a hoax, and they go, this is awesome. And then they'll catalog it. And so if you were to quiz them a week later, they'd have all the stuff that confirmed their bias memorized, and all the stuff that went against their bias would be completely forgotten or unconvincing.
Yes.
No matter which side of the argument you're on.
And so what lying does is it's very good at survival, because in the short term, a survival goal is obvious. You know what I mean? I need to make more money, convince this person to like me, and it can be ego survival, maintain this particular belief. And I know how to do that. I can like block out all the evidence and do this. But in the long term, you have to lie to yourself in order to allow those sorts of things to happen. So you have to, and we see this, these marketers who are telling me, you know, this course, the only reason that I lie about the deadline on this course is because I know it's so good and it's going to change people's lives so much that I have to pretend that I'm never going to offer it again. And because once they get in, and so they lie to themselves about their true motives, and they're never able to say that the reason I'm doing this is because I'm so desperately money hungry and empty on the inside. The only thing that fills me up is collecting more money.
Yeah.
And because they're unable to go to that deeper level of honesty, they will be less happy in the long term. They will achieve their goals, but they cannot confront the hole that they have inside of them, which is the biggest lie, the fact that they feel good, which they don't, because they wouldn't behave like this if they were filled up. And so you and I have talked about, is truth or happiness, and I actually think in the long term they are the same. That is my thing. Or you die. Or you tell the truth. The Nazis come knocking on your door. They say, are there any Jews in here? You say yes, and they kill you.
Yeah.
So if you don't die from telling the truth, it actually, I do think, leads to eventually you will be operating the world as it is. And
I'm hiding those Jews in my attic, dude. I'm lying right to that Nazi face.
Me too. Absolutely. I would. If Anne Frank is in my attic,
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Nine
Juden. I don't know. Do you agree with that? Disagree with that? I know you haven't had a chance to think about it. Do you think that they are different? Or do you think they eventually converge, being honest and being happy?
No, I think it makes sense. I mean, I think the biggest thing is when you can't be honest with yourself about, and this might be a little different than what you're saying, but about how happy you actually are.
No, this is exactly
that's the single most destructive lie. And that's how you get guys who literally, they already have hundreds of millions of dollars, and to pursue more wealth because they can't get to the fact that the reason they're so desperately trying to get wealthy is because they want power, because when they were children they didn't feel powerful because of something that happened to their dad, and what they really need to do is just go do mushrooms and either hug their dad or something. Instead, what they'll do is insider trade, like we talked about, and go to literal jail despite the fact that they were already obscenely god levels of wealthy. And you look at it from the outside, you go, this makes no sense. Why didn't they just stop at $50 million and not go to jail? And it's because they haven't been able to be honest about their own motivations, their own experiences growing up. And so that self-deception leads them to do something that looks like it makes no sense from the outside, because they can't pause and just be like, I'm actually miserable doing this. Yeah. I'm doing a breakdown on billions, and I think at some point in the video, if I do it, I have to say, we're going to talk about this guy like he's someone to aspire to, because he's powerful and he's rich and he has a couple of women that are beautiful that like him. But just to be clear, this guy almost goes to jail, has a years-long battles that cause nothing but stress in his life, gets a divorce. Like, he's far less happy than a middle-class person who just loves the people around them and has a good family. And so I think that the way that occurs is when you can't be honest with yourself about what's happening and go, wow, I'm miserable. And so instead you just keep pursuing the external stuff.
No, this is, and you've highlighted what I didn't say, which is in order to lie to other people, what you'll find is that there are very few people in the world who can be honest with themselves about the lies they tell. They necessarily, in order to maintain the image of themselves as a good person, have to first self-delude themselves into well, this was a good product, so it's worth it, or it's, that actually isn't a lie because of this. And so they build this habit, exactly what you're saying, of lying to themselves. So if they can lie about the surface level stuff, it's essential to lie about that foundational emptiness.
Oh yeah, you only clear out, in my belief, is that you only clear out the self-deception after you have stopped all of the external deception for an extended period of time, actually. It is impossible to lie to the world and not lie to yourself. What you can actually do is not lie to the world and still lie to yourself. And so what is required is not lying to the world and then doing the internal digging to find your own lies in addition. It's hard.
Yeah. No, that was my point. And I don't mean to say any of this because, like I said, I'm reflecting it on myself. The more I dig, the more I found that there are just foundational perceptual things that are intended to keep my ego alive in the way that it perceives itself, and that there is the sense that what drives my worldview at the most core levels, and I believe this is true of everybody, is the need to persist and survive, and not a need to change, grow, and be honest with the ways that the world has shifted.
Yeah.
Even though I'm like, no, this is the way the things are. You are this type of person. This is, you believe this. You live up to these ideals. Yada yada yada. So I don't mean to put myself on any sort of pedestal. In fact, that's the opposite of the point of this. So did you have any? I have a bunch of random.
I have a cool story that I saw. So it's funny. So to learn how to do a better podcast, I started following podcasts. One of the podcasts I started following is Logan Paul. And then I got into his vlogs, which are actually incredibly entertaining these days. So somehow I've ended up starting for work. I'm now subscribed to Logan Paul.
Yeah.
And there's this really cool story by this guy. I think his name is Eric, who basically has decided, I want to be a vlogger and I want to befriend Logan Paul. And so he starts by going to Jake Paul's fight, pretending to be a reporter, giving fake credentials, getting an interview from Logan Paul. Yeah, it goes viral. And then in the end, he's like, just kidding. Like, I pranked you. I'm one of you. And he's like, oh, that was cool. That's like a good move. But then Logan just goes and lives his life because he's 100 times bigger than this guy. And so then the guy goes, okay, well, I want to try to get that relationship going. So he shows up at his house to do another interview. And Logan is pissed. Logan goes, the fuck are you doing here? Like, don't show up unannounced to my home. Kicks him out and is like, now I'm not cool with this guy. And the guy's like, oh man, that was a misplay. What do I do? So instead of just giving up there, he continues to just follow Logan's stories on Instagram and stuff like that. Logan says repeatedly that he wants to get rid of these $90,000 couches that he has because he hates them. It's the number one thing he regrets buying. It's the number one thing he wants for his birthday is to get rid of them. And this guy smartly picks up on this and goes, this is my way in. Instead of just bamboozling him in his house, I'm going to come in and give him the number one thing that he has repeatedly said he wants. And so he gets a sponsor plus gets a ton of his own money for $17,000 and contacts the Logan Paul team and is like, yo, can I buy the couch? It doesn't say who he is. He's just, I want to buy the couches. Is 17 grand enough? And they go, yeah, sure. He does not live in LA, flies out to LA, hooks up with some other YouTubers, rents a U-Haul, shows up to Logan's house, hides because Logan hates him, right? And then they're like, okay, where's the buyer? And he pops out and Logan's like, this guy? And then he goes, are you just fucking me right now? Like, are you just here as a prank? And he goes, nope. He pulls out $17,000 cash and he goes, I'm here to buy your couches. And he goes, what are you going to do with them? He goes, I don't know, put them in the U-Haul. And at that point, he gets his business meeting with Logan and Mike and Logan's manager. And I thought it was just a really cool story about persistence, but also about how to connect with people. Because we've talked about this before. Oh, I have someone I want to be my mentor. How do I connect with them? And we have always said, follow what they're interested in, try to solve their problems. One of our friends showed up to a guy who's a speaker and gave him a book for $10. And I just thought this was an extreme example that was really cool. Was this dude going out on a limb, taking his own money and putting it on the line. And I hope it works out. But yeah, he got his meeting. You know what I mean?
We've been talking about this for a long time. There's a video we've not made, which is how to recover from a bad first impression. I think you just got it right there, right? Because I've actually never known. The truth is, most of the time, when you make a bad impression on someone, it's like, don't worry about it. The world is a big place. Like, continue to do your thing. And we have a handful of other tips that are good. But I've never been able to really, why would you work so hard to salvage something? And in fact, because the thing is, by working hard, it's getting worse, and by like needing, you're making the impression worse. So you have to do something so spectacular and over the top that it compensates for the fact that you're, like, Logan was suspicious of him even when he saw him there. And I think that's a very good case study. Yeah. Don't know that anybody wants to go that far, but like...
Well, what I think is cool is that I think there are a lot of people who have said to themselves, I want to be a vlogger. I'd love to be a Paul brother, or I'd love to be Logan's friend. He has so many fans. I'm sure there are hundreds of thousands of people out there who are like, I would love to live this life and be their friend. And this one guy said, I'm actually going to do what that takes. You know what I mean? I'm going to fast track myself there. And we'll see how it works out. But that might be the best 17 grand that guy ever spends in his life.
Maybe. There's a handful of those stories. The Ryan Holidays who like show up at Tucker Max's thing, writes them. And this is back in the day before people were doing this very specific, why I'm going to work for you for free, what I'm capable of doing. And he'd clearly read all of Tucker's work. It wasn't just like, I'll do anything. It was like, I'm going to do this because you need this and you said you needed this. So we took him in, and then Ryan Holiday wrote a bunch of New York Times bestsellers, and like he got his mentorship. So I do think that, there's room for that. Yeah,
we don't actually make it public what we need, so we're very hard people to do this for.
Well,
but
I'm not a good mentor.
No, but I'm saying if you have people that you want to follow or that you want to work with or you want as mentors, like following their Instagrams and their newsletters and trying to understand how you can help them. And
it's really not me. I'm just putting like I hang out and we played Apex Legends for several hours yesterday. Like Logan is hustling, Tucker was hustling. I'm going to teach you how to kick back, and I think you can get that on your own. So a random segue. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I'm out of topics for today.
I just thought this was interesting. I watched an interview with JJ Redick, and he mentions that he almost quit basketball.
Yeah, I saw that.
Because of people were being so mean to him.
At 19, when he was the number one college player in the country.
When he was incredibly handsome, incredibly good at basketball,
famous,
like also, and it was not that he was perfectly well liked, but at his own school they really did like him. He did say the lunch lady gave him the side eye.
Oh, but I'm sure objectively, when JJ Redick walked around Duke's campus, he was beloved.
Yes.
Well, go ahead, you say your thing, and then I have another takeaway.
He almost quit basketball. Yeah. That he was so talented, so good, and you would think, oh my God, I remember being like, oh, that's JJ.
Oh yeah, I would love to switch places with him.
I just wanted to switch bodies with him so bad.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know how many times I have to get this lesson. You just don't know what it's like to walk in other people's shoes. You don't know what it's like. And everybody assumes, they talk about, Cardi B or Ellen being out of touch because they have money. You do not know what it's like to live in their head and their body. You assume that having millions of dollars would make everything better. And while it would solve some of the problems you're aware of, it would almost certainly create problems that you've never encountered. Yeah. And so I'm not saying money is bad, and I'm not saying that adding more to your life might not remove some stress. But I've just been proven wrong. Every time I've been jealous of somebody and I learn more about their life in a moment of candor, I go, wow, like, what was I thinking? Why was I wasting effort and energy on thinking this?
Well, isn't it also a fascinating insight into the human mind that someone can have 90% of their in-person experiences be incredible, but still feel hated because they're receiving messages of hatred from people that they don't know well, who aren't in their community?
He received 50 hate calls a day on his cell phone. They leaked his phone. I mean, they found ways to get to him.
Yeah.
Like, he wasn't like, oh, turn off the computer. It was like,
What percentage of his day do you think was interacting with haters? I did the math.
He was getting phone calls more than every 20 minutes. And I don't know if he was interacting with them. Yeah. They leaked his phone number. And so, like, he was...
I'm sure he changed phones, though.
Sure.
I find it really hard to believe that most of his life wasn't just people being in awe of him.
Yes. But also, you turn on the TV, you turn on this, people like...
You don't have to. That's what I'm saying. You don't have to watch SportsCenter and see Stephen A. Smith shit on you.
You do have to show up at a game at somebody else's thing and have...
away games.
And have, 40,000 people tell you that you're, scream at you and
And you show up at a home game where people tell you you're a god. This is my point, is that the human brain is just better at holding on to criticism than it is at holding on to praise.
Well, it can't handle the scale of the world. It just can't. We never would see 40,000 people. And so certainly if 40,000 of them hated you, it was like, well, this is the end.
Yeah. No, if you're in a village and 40,000 people hate you,
I'm about to be executed.
No, this is the end for me.
And forget what happened, 2 days ago, because this is truly the end of my life right now. I just thought that was...
No, it's just fascinating. I mean, you've seen it. You can read 20 comments, and if 18 of them are good, but 2 are mean, Those are the two you watch and reread and focus on.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. Human brain cannot comprehend criticism.
Poor JJ. And then
Not poor JJ though. He's all right now.
No, he's fine. Well, then he got older, and what's funny is he's obviously in the NBA, but he's not the standout. He was the greatest basketball player in his age group at that time, and he's not today. And it's better for him. Now, granted, he's made a lot of money and all those sorts of things, but yeah, when I was younger, I thought that getting older was just worse in every way. After a certain point, after you were like out of the house, I was like, well, that's it. You peak at 21. You can drink now. And from here on out, it gets worse. And it seems that as people get older, they get perspective and wisdom and generally sometimes become happier. Though not all the time. So maybe this is a cuttable thing, but we've talked about it before. I'll say the last piece of thing that I have is on Reddit, I told you there was this article, uplifting news, that was guy goes, Steakhouse regular comes to Steakhouse, tips entire stimulus check, uplifting news.
Yep.
And I think that's I don't know this person in particular, so who knows what they're going through, but another read on this, which my brother brought to my attention, is, okay, this guy is a Steakhouse regular.
Yeah.
This is a guy who regularly goes to steakhouses. He doesn't just cook steaks, he eats out at steakhouses.
Yeah, there's tiers of people. There's people who once a month treat themselves to a steak at home. Then there's people who every week cook a steak.
Yeah.
Then there's a guy multiple times a week who goes, $75 for dinner? So, I could do that.
Okay, so or 35 or 45, who knows? So he gets a stimulus check, which is not mandatory. You have to apply for these.
Yeah. Why did he get a stimulus check?
I don't know. And I don't know for what particular, because there's a bunch of different kinds of stimulus. You can get the $1,200, you can get the small business loan. I don't know his situation, and I don't mean to say this particular guy is bad, but okay, so he's going to steakhouses, he's getting a stimulus check, which is essentially a pool of money from the entire American population that is intended to go to the people
in
need it the most. And what does he do with it? He redistributes it to his tiny little inner circle of people who, do you think they're not going to give him free steaks after this? You think he's not going to get you think, like, this is, so I don't know the particulars, which clearly matter in this situation, but what on its surface or might appear to be a very generous thing, I think this is a problem. People do not comprehend where the money comes from.
And it doesn't come from the government. It comes from you.
It comes from Mississippi.
It comes from everyone else who has ever paid
Alaska,
taxes.
And people whose wages will stay the same, but inflation will occur and will make less for the rest of their lives.
People think of it as printing new money because they are technically printing new money, but that just makes your money less valuable.
Yes.
And so now we're all poorer so that these stimulus checks can go out, which is fine when they go out to people that should get them, whoever that is. But
so essentially what he did is he said, I've determined that everybody should pay these tiny groups of people even more. And maybe they've already gotten their stimulus checks, but they need more.
Yeah.
Instead of just going, I'm not one of the people that should be getting a stimulus check. I mean, that's the uplifting news. Guy who is upper middle class doesn't fill out stimulus check application, doesn't single-handedly distribute,
allows finite pool of funds to go to people who need it.
So, and I've seen that mentality with this stimulus, which is everybody's got to get theirs. And that's...
Well, there is a sense that this is finite, and if you don't take it, it is going to go to other people.
I feel that. And so that's part of what started what I mentioned earlier, which is this, I've been frustrated and angry at the cheaters, and what I see when I look inside myself is I desperately have that desire to claim for myself as well, and it's only this like cognitive philosophical brain that is really suppressing those emotional impulses that feel like there's not enough, it's not, and of course it's silly, because one of the nice result of the introspection that I've done is I genuinely, and it's only been a handful of days, I feel much more grateful. Like I walk around, I'm like, holy cow, I have hot water. I don't often think that thought, and because the way that I had to get there was by going, well, wait a second, this is for people who need it, and if you're a person who needs it, that means you might not be able to pay rent next month. And like you can. So forget that you don't have, like, do you want to trade with that? Do you want to be accepting the stimulus check and curious if you're going to be able to pay rent in 2 months? Like, no, you're a beneficiary of the system. You make silly little YouTube videos. And it's, weirdly enough, it made me sadder for a period of time because I was like, oh man, I want this stuff and I'm not getting it. And I had to admit that. And then I think ultimately, when you're honest, it's like, holy cow, things are good. I'm very lucky. I don't live in Papua New Guinea. I can pay my rent next month, and I don't need to worry about this.
Well, that's a big philosophical difference between political parties and people in the U.S. Is that people will often say, hey, congratulations on, you guys doing so well with Charisma on Command, this and that. And like, yeah, I was basically born at the finish line and I kind of like fell over it. You know what I mean? Or like they like gave me the ball at the 1 yard line with no defenders in front of me and they said, you want to just walk forward. And some people have made businesses for themselves and they think, I did this all on my own. I built this. The government shouldn't tax me. The success is mine. And I don't even mean from a sense of the fact that that's not true, because anyone who drives on roads takes advantage of taxpayer money.
Supplies that are driven to them on roads. Yeah.
I don't even mean that. I mean the fact that you weren't born in a place where there was gun violence all the time, or where you had to drop out of school as a teenager to support your siblings because you didn't have a parental figure.
Where there was an inquisition and you were the wrong religion. And you were...
That's what I mean. Is like, forget the fact that actually we should all pay taxes, because actually we would all like to call 911 when shit gets bad.
Yeah.
It's... Yeah, you just were born into a place where you could go to school and focus on studying.
Yeah.
And that's the 20-yard line. And then you got to go to college because you
beyond
didn't
the 20-yard line if you open up history to the entirety of human experience, which is like for the first 100,000 years.
But I'm just saying even today, almost no one is, in my opinion, should get to say the phrase of, I did this on my own. You had parents, dude. That's how you exist. Yeah. You were... Two people allowed you to exist. They get credit for your existence. I don't know. To me, I think that's a fundamental difference in certain people's mindsets, and I think it changes your whole worldview.
Yeah, and I know that you don't mean it to, but I want to elaborate, because I think that sometimes Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, whatever, they talk past each other, because they'll be like, you didn't do it on your own, and then the other person will respond, well, I worked really hard. And both of those are true.
Yeah.
Both of those things are true. You might have distinguished yourself from other people also born at your level of advantage that didn't do that. So that's not to say you haven't separated yourself in some way. It is to recognize that in the scheme of human experience, if you are listening to this right now, likely, I don't know, everybody, you could be anywhere in the world, you are in the top 1%.
Oh, yeah. I mean, victory was literally being born in Bucks County, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And then from there, listen, I worked hard in high school. I'm not trying to diminish my achievements, but I'm just saying I was greatly helped out literally by just the ability to be able to focus on studying in high school to the extent I wanted to. Like, that's an upper hand. Like, that's what I mean.
Yeah. And then people can disagree about how to redistribute taxes or whatnot, or should there be more taxes or less, but I very much agree with that philosophical thing. It was interesting because that came up in PewDiePie has been reacting to Jubilee. Those videos where they have, one millionaire talks to, and Graham Stephan, for whatever reason, on the inside with those guys, he's done a handful of videos with them. So he's
just their go-to millionaire,
their go-to millionaire. He's one of their go-to millionaires. Then PewDiePie talked about it, and his thing was, when people talk about making their millions, it's just pure luck. And Graham Stephan responded, yes, it is, these things, but you have to work hard, you have to do this. And the thing where my determinism comes in is, well, why did you work hard, Graham? Was that an independent free will choice that you made? Or like, why do you have the IQ that you had? You weren't born, you don't have a learning disability. And even if you did have a learning disability, it's not one that has prevented you from communicating clearly. Like there are, to me, I understand when people say it's entirely luck, because if you look, if I rolled the dice the wrong way and I have no vocal cords, a non-functioning brain,
severe levels of Down syndrome,
severe levels of whatever, like, yeah, I'm not, none of my hard work supersedes that and puts me at a level of this level of success. So you really do have to take those things very for granted to say that it's not luck, while recognizing that people can be born with similar apparent circumstances and then still distinguish themselves.
Yeah.
But even those apparent circumstances, Tom Cruise mentions this at some point. He says, I worked hard. And somebody says, yeah, but what made you Tom Cruise? Like, what is it that instilled that work ethic? Is that something you chose, or is that a product? And in my view, it is, because I'm a determinist, of the influences in your life, the things somebody said to you when you were 6 years old, the way that your unique brain chemistry interpreted that and what that meant for you. In my opinion, we're all along for the ride looking out of our own eyes.
Yeah.
And so anything shy of, if life's going pretty good, of gratitude doesn't make sense.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean that you can't argue about how much taxes should be allocated. That's
Yeah. No, and also to keep the metaphor going, you can pull a Deshaun Jackson. You can be at the 1 yard line and throw the ball behind you on accident.
Well, he's only at the apparent 1 yard line. And I know you're the Deshaun Jackson for those.
If anyone doesn't know, Deshaun Jackson literally sprinted through, had no defenders in front of him, thought he had a touchdown, and celebrated early by tossing the ball backwards 20 yards when he was 1 yard away.
Yeah.
And thankfully no one picked it up because it was just a fumble.
Yeah.
But he did not get that touchdown.
But even people who are there, who goes, oh, they had everything. They were born with millions of dollars. Well, that's only apparently an advantage. Because who knows if that same genetic brain born into poverty might have done incredible. Like, it clearly hasn't been an advantage for them. So when I step into my determinist mind, I just have very different opinions than a lot of people.
Sure, but I mean, even on Team Free Will over here, I think it's fair to say, people should just be grateful and not consider themselves necessarily superior to others because of their success compared to others.
Yeah, and on Team Determinism, you can't say people should anything. Whether or not you're grateful isn't even in your choice. You either are.
That's why I hate determinism.
All right, so let's do questions.
Cool.
I'm gonna grab my brother.
Yeah, get up real close to that microphone,
Nice.
Justin.
Okay, so the first one is, hi, Charlie and Ben. My name is Teresa, and I'm a 28-year-old captain in the U.S. Air Force. I have a question related to self-love. After struggling with the root cause of anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, and lack of identity for most of my life, I'm happy to report I've made lasting progress in developing self-love through a reconnection with Christianity. It was really God who made the progress in healing me, not my strength. I'm curious to know how you guys foster self-love. Is it based in religion, philosophy, psychology, a combination of those, or something else?
Do you want to go first, or would you like?
No,
to?
sure don't.
So, for me personally, what would I say? I believe that what self-love is, because it's worth defining, is an unconditional acceptance of one's everything, thoughts, experiences, the things that we might not like about ourselves. And one of the big values of religion, even though I don't believe in the objective existence of a God, is that part of self-love in my experience is getting out of your own ego mind and the thoughts that you have and going, there's something guiding me. And it could just be the part of my brain that runs my heart, the part of my brain that runs my kidneys that I'm not thinking about. Like, something clearly is guiding me and running me that is beyond my thoughts, that is looking out for me when I sleep, when I'm not thinking, and that the universe is an ultimately a good place. And I can see how when you, real or not, I don't even want to argue about his objective existence or her objective existence, God really does satisfy that. The universe is a good place, something is looking out for you, and I think that enables you to relax into a deeper level of acceptance. So I see the value of God in self-love, and I would say that the way that I get there is by believing more or in experiencing a higher self, a part of myself that is taking care of things even when I'm not thinking about them. And I know that that's happening because my heart has never stopped beating, which is...
Yet.
I haven't thought about every beat it's ever done. I haven't cleared, when I've gotten drunk, the alcohol out of my system. Something is helping me in an incredible way. And for me, that doesn't require God. But yeah, I that's kind of where I land on that. What about you?
Yeah, so I'm pretty agnostic at this point. So any self-love I have is not based on a religion or even a belief in a higher power necessarily. I'd say my personal journey to self-love has had multiple phases. I think step one was work on the external world. I think at some point I was not charismatic. I'd never had a job, so I had no real money to speak of or anything like that. And it was about setting goals and achieving them was the step one of building self-esteem and therefore self-love, right? So go out and become charismatic and go out and become successful in that. And then at some point I went, okay, well that's led to confidence, that's led to good external circumstances, but not necessarily to what you said, self-acceptance. So I think at some point for me, I switched from, okay, the goal is just to maximize like the score in life, to I have to accept not just the good stuff and not just take pride in my achievements, but I have to go back and look at the things I'm not proud of and accept that those happen too. And so that second journey was very benefited by psychedelics. That was the first time that I kind of looked in and went, wow, I'm not perfect. Up to that point, I said, I'm going to try to be perfect. I'm going to get as close to perfect as humanly possible. And then I will love myself for that perfection. That was phase one. Totally fine phase, I think, for the time in my life. Then at some point I went, okay, actually, if I want to have true self-love, I have to accept that I'm not perfect. And I kind of went back and looked at the times that I wasn't proud of my behavior or was ashamed of what had happened to me or things like that. And then that second phase has taken me where I am today. And I don't think I'm perfect. I'm sure there will be a third phase at some point, but that's kind of where I'm at. It's been a good formula so far.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't mention psychedelics, but I'm glad you did, because that I wouldn't have gotten to a lot of these these experiences. And I think one of the things that psychedelics do is, while not necessarily religious, I think they give, I don't know, well, I'd be curious. Do you describe it as a spiritual experience or think of it? You don't? No? So for me, I never use the word spiritual, but it's so different from every other experience in my life that that sounds like a good term for it.
Yeah. No, if I had to describe it, specifically ayahuasca, which has been the most therapeutic, I would describe it as getting to cut through my own self-deception and see inside my mind with a clearer lens that is less tied to my ego and less tied to what I want to be true. I'm more tied to what's actually happening in my mind. And so you get to see, oh, wow, like you think that this is how you believe, or that you think that this is your opinion of this thing or how you operate. But actually, there's more fear than you would have acknowledged. There's more self-loathing than you would have allowed. There's more shame around this thing that happened when you were 16 than you possibly would have admitted to yourself. I think it like wipes the lens clean, and you can look internally without having your defensiveness, your ego, your cognitive biases, and all that stuff. So that's how I describe ayahuasca. It doesn't, there could be higher powers, but that doesn't make me, they're not religious experiences to me.
Got it. Well, so they're not either for me. They're not religious experiences for me. And I guess I just put the word spiritual on almost what you said. And you can think of it as brain, you can think of it as this, but it is just different than my waking conscious experience, for sure. So great question. Yeah, I think,
Also, we talk about psychedelics a lot. I actually do want to shout out holotropic breathwork.
Yeah.
Not necessarily as quick to get to those points, but for people who, we get a lot of questions like, how do I do ayahuasca, this and that.
Or like Russell Brand, someone who has a history of drug abuse, shouldn't necessarily.
But I'm just saying, you don't have to go to Peru and find a shaman. Actually, if you look into holotropic breathwork and you're willing to put in 45 minutes of time, you can get to a point where your brain will release more DMT, just like it would if you took a certain plant, and you can have this experience from home legally without spending
safe.
money. And it's totally in your control, because you can always change your breath. So we talk about psychedelics a lot. I actually want to encourage people, check out holotropic breathwork as a very great alternative to.
Also, ecstatic dance. I did one yesterday.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. Ecstatic dance is great. I just don't have a good spot for it.
Yeah.
I feel weird because there's always people in my apartment. But ecstatic dance is one of those other things that will give you, it takes 15, 20 minutes to hit the zone. Again, this is all, I'm working on it because for the emotional mastery course. But if you want to sign up for that, we'll put the link in the description. Also, do we have a sponsor?
You said we had a sponsor. You said Cut was our sponsor.
I thought that Cuts might be a sponsor. Cuts is the t-shirt that I'm wearing right now. And they're giving 15% off if we set this up in time to anybody who signs up with the code. So they're really super comfy shirts. I've been wearing them. If you want to check that out, that'll be in the description as well. But the ecstatic dancing can lead to these types of moving, weird, altered states of consciousness.
Do you find, so I've done ecstatic dance on my own. I find it's a great way to boost joy. I find it's like an instant hit of mini ecstasy.
Yeah.
I find holotropic breathwork is more similar to ayahuasca in the sense that you can have a breakthrough about your life. Like I never am ecstatic dancing, and then all of a sudden I realize something about my childhood or something about.
I have.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. For me, the breathwork is definitely.
Breathwork is great.
More self-improvement focused, and the ecstatic dance is more.
Like my day.
Okay. Yeah. This is like doing Molly without the come down.
Yeah. No, I haven't both, and they're different. And experimenting, you can combine them a little bit. You can do 5 minutes of breathwork, stand up, and then you'll go even harder at the dancing, which is cool. But all of those things are cool ways to experience altered states of consciousness. And to bring it back to your question, I think those altered states of consciousness gives you, to our earlier conversation, a lot more access to the truth. And through that truth, you work through some stuff, and that's where like self-love kind of has unfolded. And I don't think I'm done. I think total self-love looks like some guy on a mountain sitting very still, not trying to prove anything to anyone.
Yeah. But I think one thing I didn't realize till a couple years ago, though, to something we said earlier, a lot of self-love is about self-acceptance. It's not about perfection. It's not about being the best. It's just about accepting who you are. And so I think if God gets you there, or if psychedelics get you there, or if breathwork gets you there, meditation gets you there, I think that to have true self-love is to love all parts of yourself and to have forgiveness for any mistakes you've made. So if you look into the past with hatred for yourself and you go,
it's a good sign that you got some stuff to do.
that's why, and it's not, that's impeding your self-love.
Yeah.
And when you can look back on your past and go, yeah, makes sense. You were 16. Like, of course this happened to you and you couldn't have prevented it. Okay. Now you're closer to what I would consider self-love.
Yeah. Interesting. I would add one tweak or wrinkle to that, which is that if you look on your past and you're ashamed or whatever, I actually don't think that's impeding your self-love. I think that's a symptom of it. And so what people sometimes try to do when they think that's in the way is they try to forgive before they feel forgiveness, or they try to convince themselves that they're not ashamed. And the only way, if you've done some of this, because what you've realized is if you've had a psychedelic experience and you've gone into something, you thought you dealt with it. You're like, I'm not ashamed of that thing. I'm not. And what you realize is the only way to genuinely not be ashamed of it is to go in it, through it, and let it be horrible, right? To let it, all the pain and the sadness and the anger come up. And then you come out of having gone through it, and forgiveness is natural. There's no effort. There's no I should forgive. I just do. I don't, there's no I shouldn't feel ashamed. I just don't anymore. And so if you're like working on shame by telling yourself not to feel ashamed, or working on forgiveness by telling yourself you ought to forgive, I actually think that will not get you to self-love. The only way out, as they say, is through. So anyways, that was a long answer.
Yeah, good luck cutting that down into something interesting, Justin.
Okay, next one is I've been loving the emotional mastery so much, it's incredible.
Justin, you are such a good salesman. Thank you for bringing this up.
It has helped me work through coming to terms with being gay, classic middle child syndrome, my crippling shyness. But the one thing after all the personal development I have delved into for the past 7 years, the one thing I can't get over is feeling ugly. Is there any advice for a person who can't just shake the feeling of being unattractive, especially in a family of good-looking people, where it's a high-value trait that I can't seem to live up to? It's hard because I can't help comparing myself not only to everyone in my family, but also everyone I meet. And sometimes it feels like who I am would matter more if I was better looking, let alone when it comes to finding love. I know this is the core of emotional mastery, so maybe I also have to be patient, but any supplementary pieces of wisdom would be appreciated.
Sure. Can I hop in with some quick stuff?
Go.
So I think there's two things. One is I think it's totally fine to be concerned with how you look, if that translates to just trying to maximize yourself, trying to be relatively fit, be relatively well-groomed, this and that. I think when it becomes something that you're obsessed with, and especially something you idolize, that's the downside. So I don't want my answer to think for people to be like, oh, like this
Stop
means
showering.
just ignore this, or like that the gym has no value. I think there's value to presenting yourself the best you can given your genetics. But something you said was, I think this is getting in the way specifically of finding love. I have not seen in my life that the better looking people get better relationships. Better looking people might get better looking people in their relationships, but doesn't seem to translate to being happier or finding someone that makes you happy. So I would say that there potentially is a bit of, I don't know if it's grass is greener or if idolizing is the right word, the sense that, oh, if I were Brad Pitt, then I would have an amazing, beautiful wife. But if you look at Brad Pitt, he's had 2 divorces and was an alcoholic. And I think he's a great lesson, because I think he's the most attractive guy on the planet. He's also incredibly rich, incredibly famous. So yeah, even if you are average or ugly, that doesn't condemn you to anything. In fact, you can go have a much better relationship than all the attractive people you see that seem so nice on the outside. So that's the biggest thing that I would say.
Yeah. And so Ben's advice is 100, I think, is very true. What's interesting is that these things are often obvious and we might have heard them before, but they don't stick. And they sometimes don't stick because it goes back to a core thing for where you got the message at some point in your life, probably when you were very young,
childhood,
that looking good equals love. And so I could tell you, and you could see that looking good doesn't equal love, and you could find, but it's not going anywhere. So oftentimes what happens, and this is why if you go to week 2, you go to the trigger meditation. I know that this one might be deep, so it can take some time to crack. We've also mentioned psychedelics, if not to push, but
holotropic breath work,
or even psychedelics if they call to you. MDMA is particularly strong for trauma. So if you find a safe place to do it with somebody who knows what they're doing,
Yeah, let's say MDMA therapy.
MDMA therapy, yeah.
Which is different from doing MDMA.
Yeah. So that's
you go to a club and rip a bunch of MDMA, it will not help with this problem.
This can take you deep into these core problems, and it sounds like this is very, very, very core. So what you'll often find is that you get these triggers. So I mentioned a trigger of people accepting stimulus checks, and you might see that somebody's very handsome, and the winding circuitous path back to its root is oftentimes obscured. And so I don't want to speculate, because it's easy to go, oh, you were told that when you were little, ugly is not love. And maybe that's the case, but it also could be something totally different. And what's really useful, so if you're going through it, do the trigger meditation. I'm going to be updating the course soon with a deeper understanding of how these things can wind, and I'll try to guide better. So if this isn't taking you there, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, I will be able to do better. You can additionally add breath work prior to these, the trigger meditation, which again, I'm going to include in the course in a few weeks. But the goal, as exactly as we talked about, is to experience the actual problem, because what you're dealing right now is a surface problem. Oh, I'm ugly, people don't love me. And you'll find that what the core problem is, just I'm fundamentally unlovable, or for whatever reason it is. And when you can experience that, all the branches that come from that, it's like you cut a thread, and they might not go away completely, because there's probably all these different things in your life, but once you start to cut these threads, they pull on you less and less and less. So the trigger meditation is a great place to start with whatever is triggering you. I'm going to add breath work into the course soon. And if you want the path of fire, psychedelics can just, with a strong intention, can cut right through and hit it very, very quickly.
Yeah. But yeah, your looks are not getting in the way of love. They may be getting in the way of validation via having a person that you think makes you look good to the outside world. Mm-hmm. But you're good. Some of the happiest people I know are not conventionally attractive. So.
And what's funny is, and I don't want to bank on this, oftentimes I'll hear this from somebody, and then I'll see them, and I'll be like, "You're not ugly." like what? And it's funny how our perceptions of ourselves will purposefully filter. Oh, that person said so, and that person said so. Never mind the other 6 people who said no, you're totally fine. And 2 of them who are like, actually, I'm quite attracted to you. Like that just all gets left to the side. My sister's like, actually, I think that your brother isn't as handsome as you. Well, they're obviously lying, because I'm hideous and I know it. And so you can filter out competing information if it doesn't suit your narrative. Anywho, good luck.
Last one is, I have to cut off a relationship with my mother. It doesn't matter what I do, how I do it, or why I do it. I will always be her child, even when she's on her deathbed and I'm entering old age myself. In that relationship, I had no chance to be a man or even a better person, and I want to avoid doing that with others if I can. On that note, I'm wondering what your thoughts are about rites of passage based upon personality, if we should, and how we can restore this tradition. I'm defining a rite of passage as a transitory event after which a person should think of themselves differently, and when an individual acquires new rights and responsibilities. For example, being of the age to drink, drive, and rent a car were rights because I was old enough, but it didn't feel like I was different, and I didn't feel like I had different obligations. I want a rite of passage to be tied to personality, being a better / gooder man. I don't think it is. It's strictly in what others can depend upon you for. So if there are no more rights waiting for us in life, save for death, how can we actively shift the way people relate to us, simulating a rite of passage? Is it as simple as setting / changing boundaries and changing what things we do to leveraging quote unquote people like us do things like this, thereby changing the way the person relates to me?
Is that it?
Yeah.
We got it.
It's a lot.
There's a lot. So it just made me think, did you feel different after your bar mitzvah?
No.
That was because, I mean, not that bar mitzvahs have never, but when I went to them, I was like, I do not think you feel like a man right now.
Did you feel differently after you lost your virginity?
That might have been one.
That was one.
That was one. And it was more just like stress was real. I was like, whew. Thought that would never happen because that might have been one. But there's a lot in there. So let's start with this. Your mother, you'll always be your child. I mean, my mom actually says that to me, which is I can never not have you be my son, and that's fine. But what's interesting in a relationship, and I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't, because I don't know any specifics about the relationship with your mother. she can view you as a child without you accepting that view of yourself. You know what I mean? She can view you as her child, and you could say, yes, I am her child, but I am still a man, and I will behave as such.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. I'm my parents' child, but also a 32-year-old man. Like, I don't think that label is a bad thing. We're all someone's child.
Sure. And perhaps to her, that means that she needs to cut the corners off your sandwiches, or do X, Y, and Z. My mom has been trying to send me masks for stuff, and I'll often have to tell her, stop. Like, I don't need this. But I wonder, and I'm not saying for sure because you didn't really include specifics, if there's not a middle ground of cutting your mom off versus part of being an adult means you don't have to accept the relationship. So she says, no, this is how it's going to be. Part of being adult isn't, oh, it's my way or the highway. It's, no, actually, it's going to be like this. Like...
Sure, and also, just to be clear, maybe this mom is incredibly destructive, drug addict, abusive. There are reasons to cut your mom off. But also... Yeah, you can define the relationship to be whatever you want it to be, and you can draw boundaries. And then if she oversteps them, if you say, "Yeah, we can have calls once a week, but you have to stop calling me every day," and she keeps calling you, okay, there can be a penalty for crossing a boundary.
What's interesting is, as I think through the question, and if I'm mischaracterizing, let me know, Justin. It seems like you want a rite of passage so other people treat you differently.
Yeah,
and it seems like what you need is to sit down and do your own internal rite of passage so that you feel differently, because you're waiting on other people to treat you differently and tell you that you're a certain way. And what that might be is an indication that you haven't assumed the mantle of self-directed, I take your advice, but I make the decision. Your own man,
whatever that means to you.
Well, I think, and it's, here, I appreciate your counsel, but I'll make the final decision type of thing. And if people, I know that there were periods in my life where everyone thought that they would counsel me, and it wasn't a rite of passage, but when I left my job, everybody thought that they would tell me how I was going to do it, and I didn't listen. And after that, the advice that I received was very different. It was offered not as a commandment, but as advice, because that was the rite of passage where I said, you don't tell me what to do anymore with my behavior.
I actually think maybe people are going to come at me and tell me this is wrong. In today's age, I think rite of passage is overrated, or not the way that I would think about it. It's just a choice. Like, the sense I got from this question was that the person wants some sort of thing that he can do that will then make him feel like a man, and make other people treat him like a man, right? Like living in the wilderness for 6 months and then coming out the other side and having mom or friends or whatever go, oh, wow, like now you're a different person. And I think I would throw that thought away if I were you, and especially if you live in the Western world and are over 18. And I would just say this is just a choice.
I actually don't, as you say that, college was a rite of passage, man. That was a thing. We moved out of the house, we went to college. For me, going abroad was another level of independence.
Well, what are you defining rite of passages? I mean, these are things that you did, sure.
They were clear delineations of a before and an after period. When I lived in my parents' house, there were rules and responsibilities for what it meant to live in my parents' house and how decisions would be made. And like on a line, the day that I went to college, things changed.
Yeah, but if you hadn't gone to college and had become a construction worker, things still would have changed.
They would have not shifted on a dot.
No, they would have. If you had gotten a job and gotten your own apartment.
If you moved out.
Yeah.
So, but here's the thing.
Sure, so a rite of passage could be leaving.
Leaving, yes. So I actually do think that they're important.
But I don't think that's a rite of passage. I actually think, and maybe you can just define it differently. My sense would be someone can only control you to the extent that you let them or give them power over you. So if you are going to live in someone's place and not pay rent, and then they want to tell you what to do, yeah, like you don't get to necessarily be a self-directed adult because you're living off of them. You know what I mean? They're supporting you. But that, I guess, rite of passage sounds like something else to me. And to me, this is not just true of your parents. This is true of anyone. If someone comes into your house and you're paying the rent for them, you get to kind of tell them what's up. And then if you go out and live on your own, no one gets to control you, and you're your own person. I think it's just it's about dependence.
Sure. So for you, what I would recommend is, because we don't know the particulars of your own life, you're asking, like, you kind of want a culturally prescribed rite of passage, or what do we think? Or that's at least the way that I'm hearing it. What I would do is sit very still, take three deep breaths, close your eyes, and say, what rite of passage do I need to step into the role of independent man so that I can still potentially, this is your call to add this optional, relate to my mother? What do I need to do? And I don't know your situation. It might be move out. It might be become financially independent. It might be tell her the truth about things that you've been hiding from her because she calls you and nags you, and you just keep secrets from her to avoid the nagging. I suspect the good news is that this is more in your control than you perceive, and it doesn't have to be, oh, we've all gathered together to put you on a chair and sing.
That's what I guess that's the point I'm trying to make, is it's actually 100% in your control.
Mm-hmm.
Achieve financial independence, and then make whatever decisions you want with regards to all the people in your life who you want to see and not see, and how much sway they have in your decisions.
And weirdly, the rite of passage is going to be in cutting that cord, which is people who are dependent upon their mother or their brother or their sister or their friend to behave in a certain way can only go so far away before they yank the chain and go, well, I'm not going to do that, and you're yanked right back.
Yeah, we've seen this with someone we know. So sure, I'll get behind that. A huge rite of passage, if you want to be decisive, independent, and in control of your life, is financial independence.
And to recognize, and I think as I think of this particular individual, that love is not about providing for necessarily, being dependent upon, or controlling the other person. Like that you can be two independent adults that love and care for one another and want the best, but do not have direct control over finances or behaviors of the other. And that can be a tough phase for both the parent and the child too.
That's the best form of love, I think, in parental relationships and in romantic relationships.
Once you're a certain age, when you're 6.
No, yeah. I'm saying if you're above 18 or you're above 21.
Yeah.
But I'm specifically, I'm thinking in dating relationships too. Mm-hmm. Like I've had times where I was supporting a girlfriend, and I actually think that to some extent it taints the relationship. Mm-hmm. And I think with parents or with friends or with romantic people, what you said is true. It's not just parents. It's like when you're two independent adults that do not depend on the other person for shelter or food. Now you can have.
But you still choose.
Now you can choose. Yeah. Now you can decide what your relationship is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hope that helps. And if we missed, because it was a long question.
Yeah. This guy's sitting here just
I apologize. Like you completely whipped.
Isn't true at all. My mom's a heroin addict, and this is not helpful.
Is that it for questions? Awesome. So thank you guys. If you guys want to sign up for Patreon, and it would mean we did it in 2 weeks, and I would be super happy. But first off, thank you to everyone who already signed up for Patreon. We've raised, I think, almost $350 every single month. It means a ton. I'm very flattered. I've read your messages, and though I haven't gotten back to all of them, and I probably won't, I have read them. One person even wrote in that they canceled their Audible subscription because this was more valuable, and I felt I was touched, and I hope that we continue to help. So if you'd like to sign up, patreon.com/charisma on command. And if not, we'll see you in a month's time. Awesome.
Cool.
Later, people.